Welcome to the Andrew Holland Podcast, where we talk about business, entrepreneurship, and everything in between. Now, here's your host, Andrew Holland.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Andrew Holland Podcast. You're joining us in our new studio, and I'm excited to have it. It's the next step for the podcast. In today's episode, my brother Caleb is going to join me for our second episode of the Holland Brothers Series, and we're going to focus and talk about business partners. You're in for a real treat because Caleb has an excellent perspective. He's seen me more than anybody in all the ups and downs and different businesses that I've been in and business partners that I've been involved in. So stay tuned for that. Caleb, welcome back to the Andrew Holland Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
So I have to give credit where credit is due before we start talking about business partners, and that is this studio. Caleb, as I've talked about, he and I own a construction company together called Holland Brothers Construction. And he, of course, is the technical expert, the brains. I'm certainly not the brains, and I'm not the brawn either. So thank you for doing such an awesome job. I have all the credit to give to him for this amazing new studio. And this is what Holland Brothers Construction could do for you and a lot more. So one of the things we talk about on this podcast a lot is asking those around you for advice or to give you a perspective that you can't see for yourself. And we've talked a lot about introspection. We've talked a lot about perspective. And you have seen me probably more than anybody throughout all of my businesses, the garbage company, Proviro with Jeff, coffee shop, CDP, across multiple businesses. And so you've seen I've been involved with many different business partners. And of course, you and I are in business together. And we've had previous guests, Mark from Arista Winery, who's in a big business with his brother, talked about how do you make that work? Because obviously family can be challenging just because that's life. And then you get into business with them, and that makes it even more challenging. Tell us about, from your perspective, and I think you have we talk about this a lot, things that you have seen in terms of, for our listeners, when you're choosing a business partner or you're thinking about getting into business with anybody, what are the top things you would think about before doing that? And then we talked about this briefly on Holland Brothers episode 1, or the first one we had with this, but I want to delve into more detail because you, of all people, have had the closest insight into all the business partners I've had. And I've had many successes, and I've had a lot of failures, and I've had a lot of, but that's part of the experience, is succeeding and failing. And I have people that come and talk to me all the time and say, I remember I was giving a speech at an entrepreneurial class at my alma mater, University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, one time. And one of the students, when I was done talking about my experience and giving them an idea of if you're thinking about starting a business, and they said, how did you find the right business partner? And at that point in my history, I had just gotten incredibly blessed because Jeff, which is a pseudonym, and really, I mean, I'm going to probably just start using his name, Joe, because we have a good relationship. This is the first time I've actually said that. But so Joe and I didn't really know each other that well. We got into business and it worked out very, very well, but we didn't do any of the due diligence. So at that point in time, when that student asked me that, I was honest about that. I said, we really had no business being in business together, but it worked out well for us. But as I've learned, that isn't always the case. Give us your perspective just in general and use some of the things you've seen that I've gone through and how I would say you have a better judge on a lot of people. I'm generally an optimist and I try to always see the good in people. You're a little bit, I won't say a pessimist, but you're more
realist.
Yeah, you have more skepticism about people, which I think is a healthy skepticism. And sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes that's a bad thing. So tell us about advice you would give to anybody.
So I think in terms of looking at your business partner specifically that you've had and ideas of going into business with other partner or people that I would have, which would, I think, been a mistake. One, obviously the biggest thing is trust. Okay. If there's not trust there, and if you're just even a little bit hesitant, that's huge red flag. Don't do it. That small little hesitancy later on, especially if you grow with money and stuff, will become a big mistrust. Like you can't trust him with the money. You're always thinking, well, is he gonna do that right, or what's going on there? So trust is the biggest thing. In terms of having a brother do it with you, uh, I'm never looking for that. What's his ulterior motive here? Which I think in other business partners, after you've been with them a long time, you start to realize their decisions are very I'm trying to think of a nice way to put this. They have other ulterior motives that don't necessarily put you at the front of their interests. So, and I think that trust is a big thing. Now, that's not to say that with a family member you will always have trust. I've seen tons of siblings who have zero trust for each other, don't even talk to each other. Um, but so I think trust is the main thing. I think another thing in
Before we move on to that, trust, how can you have that if you don't have any experience? And maybe this is in part an answer to the question, don't just go into business with anybody, but you don't really see who someone is until things get really hard. And sometimes you have to, I don't want to say have to make that decision of who to go into business with, but when you're setting up an LLC and you're doing all the documentation, you're excited and there's this euphoric uh, aura around the whole thing. And so you haven't really seen the person, or you haven't had the benefit of seeing that person during the most challenging moments, which really exhibit or exemplify who a man or woman really is.
Well, yeah, and I think in terms of Joe, you really lucked out because you didn't really know him all that well. Um, if you guys listen to his first earlier podcast, you'll see how he just kind of called him out of the blue from someone he knew in college simp programming.
Yeah, yep.
So, and he's like, "Yeah, let's just go into business together." And you're like, "All right, let's do it." And to me, that that would seem like a big mistake, but it actually worked out really well. You know, he was never anybody that you really had trust issues with. You could
Yep.
trust him to um no, when it came to time, maybe not. Yeah, I'll get that done by this time. No. But yeah, I think you really lucked out on that. I think about a person that we had talked about on another episode that I was thinking about going in business with. Their trust wasn't really there, and I was more like what you were thinking about this excitement of just going out on your own. At the time, I worked for a construction company, and we were doing side jobs on the side already. But I actually saw what it was like in a job that didn't go so well, and then I realized, oh, he's just gonna drop the ball and leave it all on me. Talk to the customer, try to smooth things out. If there's money that needs to go in to fix it, I'll do it, and he just walks away. So, but like you said, how do you figure that out? Well, I think you get to know the person, and yours is a terrible example because you didn't really know him. You went in and it worked out. But I think for a lot of people, that's why they end up failing. They get into with a partner that, they've been buddies for a couple years maybe, and they, do fun things together, but they've never been in business. They've never been into a serious problem. And when that happens, they realize I cannot rely on this person whatsoever. And that's what will ultimately kill their business. Or they'll separate or they'll buy out, and hopefully the other person has the whatever it takes to keep that business going. I think another thing in terms of a business partner, and this is another thing, it's really hard to see before you get into business, but see their level of risk. If they're
Yeah.
if you talk to them about something that's a little risky and they just immediately shut down and they totally opposed to it, just negative feelings coming out everywhere, it's probably not going to be a good business partner because business is always going to be a risk. There's always going to be a risk. And when you really find that out is when you're doing kind of well in the first few years and you need to expand. You're going to have to take more risk, put more money in, do advertising, put more money into equipment, whatever it is. And if they're like, I don't want to do that because I'm not sure if this is going to work out, we might lose all this money that I've been saving up. Well, then they're probably not a good business partner because that's what business needs.
Yeah, that's something that I certainly didn't realize. And I want to talk about people change also. That risk tolerance level changes as you get older. I think that's a natural progression of life. And I think that's a good thing. When you're young, you can shoot for the stars, but then as you get older, you have a family, you have more responsibility. You should inherently, that risk tolerance should prevent you from doing some things you maybe would have done in your younger years. But I've seen it the other way. And when you bring this up immediately, and I'm sure you're thinking about the same examples of multiple scenarios where that yeah, I was in business and then something changed in one of my business partners' lives, or and their risk tolerance changed. And perhaps it was who they were involved in, or getting married, or just ready to take a different stage in their life where they focused a whole bunch on business and now they want to focus more on personal. And I hadn't ever experienced that, where or been, I guess, wise enough really to understand that you have to plan those things in. Otherwise, you may be caught by surprise. But for me, as soon as I realized in certain challenging business situations that that's what it was, what you just talked about, not because one person didn't trust the other or we didn't want the same goal, but because our risk tolerance, our risk levels were so different, it was like a light bulb in my eyes that I get it. And now we have to have an open and honest conversation about, okay, we've gotten to mile 5 in the marathon, but now our risk levels aren't the same, so we either have to maybe split the marathon or be on the same page in terms of where you want to take this business. And it's typically, you don't want to put, and I'll be interested in your feedback on this, the riskier person will have to adjust to the less risky person because it usually doesn't work the other way around.
No, the problem is if you force someone who doesn't want to take a risk to take a risk, they end up making poor decisions
Yeah.
in the long run. And I think it's funny. You could have two people in the same situation in businesses, and I've seen this multiple times. Let's say a business gets really big, and all of a sudden one person starts getting more risky, and the other one wants to pull back their risk. And then let's say you get big, and then you both fail. The one who was uh, pulling back might now want to take more risk, and the other one might hold back. And it's strange. You can have two people in the same exact scenario, same business, but they both react opposite to their risk level. And that's like what you're saying, it can change. And you might go in and they have a great risk tolerance, but then as time goes on, it starts kind of depleting. And if the other one doesn't, they want to get more risk. That's definitely a problem. That's the risk you take with business partners. But like I've said, it is tough to do this kind of do business alone. It's really nice to
Yeah.
have another person to lean on. And if you're going through a hard time, they're right there going, misery loves company,
Yeah.
but it's
In
like,
business and in personal
yeah,
life.
and you can talk, I talk to my dad probably most for inspiration or to bounce questions off of, but when they're not in that same thing, yeah, it's good to get advice, but it's really your business partner who knows what you're actually going, can feel what you're going through because they're going through the same thing.
Yeah. I think one of the eh, topics that is related to risk, and you would know best about this. We've talked about being married and having a business, and having business partners. And that certainly is a consideration in anybody's life. When you have other people other than yourself to think about, you inherently should be less risky. What advice would you give to someone, you have two people, maybe three people, let's say three people, and they're on the same track, they have the same goals, and then something happens in one of the business partners' lives that adjusts their risk tolerance? How do you recommend someone handle that? Because that, and you've seen it, I've had it happen to me, that can throw things in a complete upside down world and take everybody involved, including the person who had something change in their life, whether of their own volition, perhaps someone passed away and they realized, you know what, working 18 hours a day, just, it doesn't mean any more to me. I got to see that life is too short and I want to do something different, or I don't want to work as hard. What would you say to someone who is experiencing that?
That boy, that's such a tough question. I actually remember a group that my wife and I used to go watch every Christmas, Tonic Sofa. One of their members had their mother died, and they realized, you know what, I don't want to do this stuff anymore. I want to look at family and everything else, and he ended up dropping out. Um, I think it did a lot of harm to their group, but now they're rising back up, and I think the same with business partners. You might end up having to let a business partner go, kind of go your separate ways, not negatively or like I'm sick of you because of this or anything like that, but mutually agree this just isn't really working anymore. It was great when it was great, but now, and understandably, things come up in your life, and especially if a guy finds a new girl, and it's easy for his mind to get swept away in that, and then you don't focus on the business anymore. And when you're growing a new business, that is a good way to kill it. And if only one person is working on it when there should be two, well, not only does it put a strain on one person because now they're taking off everything, but sometimes one person can't do it, especially when they're going in to a business knowing that they have another person to rely on. So I think at that time, if something like that happens, the best and only thing you can really do is talk to your business partner. That's another thing about a business partner, is you need to find someone that you can actually talk to, someone you don't feel like you have to skate around the truth, someone you can actually say what's going on and say, hey, you've not been doing your work. You've been really lazy recently. What's going on here? And not someone who's like, well, how dare you call me lazy? I've been doing so much. If it's someone who's going to get defensive at any little thing like that, it's not a good business partner. So hopefully, if you come to that where you're having an issue, someone's spending more time in their personal life, hopefully you have someone that you can talk to, and maybe it'll work out. Like, you know what? I didn't even realize I was doing that.
Yeah.
Maybe I got to tell my whatever is pulling them away. We're gonna have to slow this down a little bit, so I got to focus on my business more. I didn't realize I was leaving my partner hanging. Um, that would be ideal situation, but oftentimes that's not the case. But the main thing you have to do is talk to your business partner, and hopefully you can.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things that's hard for all of us, is being honest with ourselves and looking ourselves in the mirror. And if you have the right business partner, what they say to you will be incredibly meaningful if you have that level of trust and you don't have to question what are their ulterior motives, and you know that it's coming from the right place, not to one up you, not to, a lot of people don't have that. And for me, in our first business, I was incredibly blessed because Joe and I could just yell. Not that you ever want to yell. We talked about wisdom from those who have lived far longer in our previous episode on this earth. You should only ever yell at a baseball game and nowhere else. And that's obviously really challenging as a human, especially when you're going through tough times. But we were able to have those. I think you and I as well have experienced that. You have to be able to go the next day and it's like, okay, you move forward. I've
We've
got a lot.
never yelled.
I've got a lot of thoughts about, some people are more emotional in a relationship or business partnership, and some are less. And it can be my experience, even on the personal side. Uh, if you're working with someone who's a bit more emotional, and this is in a personal relationship or in a business relationship, um, that can be more challenging. But if you can get to that level, well, I think you have to. I think you have to get to that level where you can have those strong disagreements and still be able to go to bed, wake up the next day and focus on the business, and not have an underlying grudge or have it impact that trust relationship. And I know that there are a lot of people out there where once they have that big disagreement, it's never the same. And that's probably a good indication there are some underlying issues and you might need to think about going your separate ways or finding an ulterior way to move the business forward.
Well, and it can get even worse than that. Not only do they hold a grudge, but they actually let it negatively impact the business, or deliberately go out of their way to their invective. They try to hurt you in some way, not physically, but that anger just builds up. And hopefully, if you picked a business partner, that wouldn't be the case. But that would be another thing to look out for, I think, in choosing one. If when you get angry at each other, if the other person really holds on to it for a really long time or tries to turn it into something nasty, that's probably another good indication they're not a good fit for a business partner.
Yeah, one of the other things that I've also learned, kind of jumping back to a previous topic we were talking, risk. The risk tolerance of your business partner as only as high as the risk tolerance of the people that are important in that business partner's life. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're a single individual. Okay. the risk tolerance in that relationship, two single individuals, let's say they're both pretty high. Now, one of them gets married. If the person that your business partner, or if you're getting married, your wife is
Risk
lower than yours,
adverse.
risk adverse, the other person, and this happened to me, and I've had Adam on this podcast, and he got married in 2022, bless his heart, to a beautiful gal, Andrea, and her risk tolerance is far different than ours. And it took me a while to realize, and Adam's also a friend, and so that can make things complicated, but it makes things a lot easier because we can have those conversations. For you and me, we have a moral underpinning that is identical, and that that basically solves everything in spite of when we go through challenging times. But it took me a while to realize, and now I actively do this. And Adam, if you're listening, you've probably recognized this. Whenever we have an idea, we talk about it, and then I say, what does Andrea think? And that's important to me because it's important to, well, I care about Andrea because she's a good friend too, but because it's important to Adam. But most importantly, I know that her risk tolerance level is lower than ours. And so I've realized that even if Adam would generically be more risky, he has someone that is really important in his life, and that means more than himself. And so his risk tolerance level has inherently come down. And it took me a while to realize that. And once I realized that, so many things got a lot easier because, sometimes Adam's not even, we're in the excitement of a great new idea, and then we're talking through it. And then that's such an important, whoever matters in your life, you have to think, what would they think? Or is this, and sometimes that makes it a non-starter. And a lot of times that's a good thing because I should say it's a good thing, but I tend to be a relatively risky individual. And it's certainly come back as I've gotten older, but it's also challenging when you start to trust your gut more. What would seem more risky earlier in life without the experience and the gut is actually not. And that's something I'm still trying to learn.
See, the problem with, let's say, relying on your wife, or let's say your spouse for your risk tolerance, is that the other person that's not part of the business doesn't know everything about the business and everything you've been through. So they give you advice, and I think you do a disservice to your business partner if you put too much of your decision making in somebody else who isn't in the business, was never part of it, because not that they don't have your best interest, but there could be monetary reasons why they don't want to take risks. And part of being a business partner is you need to take monetary risk. You need to put money in. You need to risk losing money. I mean, no one wants to advertise. It's expensive.
Yeah.
And it's a gamble. Are you going to get business or aren't you? But I can guarantee that you'll get very small business compared to what you could get if you put tons of dollars in advertising. But everyone sees it as a risk, which it is. So it's such a hard topic to really talk about. I think what I don't want to say I would just ignore everything that someone would tell me, but I also would think to myself, well, I know a lot more about this, or I've been doing this for a really long time and I've seen what the outcome of this can be. So I think, especially for newlyweds, they're a little too whatever of keeping the relationship sound. They're in that honeymoon phase, and oh, I don't want to rock the boat, we're so happy and everything like that. Eventually that's going to end. And if when it does, you realize, boy, I should have done this 3 years ago, we would have been way better off, then you're going to be kicking yourself. But
It's a hard, I think there are no
right
right
answers.
answers. Yeah. And every situation is unique. And just like so many things in life, it's about finding that balance. And there are times when I've wanted to jump forward into something and ultimately taking into consideration whatever business it was, all of my business partners, their risk tolerances and their spouses' risk tolerances prevented me from doing that. And it was a very good thing. And then there's other times where I feel like it was the right decision, and I wish we would have done that. But the reality of the situation is sometimes you have to make sacrifices in that scenario. Now, if it's happening too frequently and you're bumping up against it constantly and it's inhibiting a business, and I'm just speaking very generically here, that's when you might need to have some of those deeper conversations and say, hey, you know, we've taken this business to this level, and now our focuses are different, uh, and maybe it's best if we part ways mutually. And I've had this too, um, where one wants to focus more on the personal side of things, and I'm still moving forward on the business side of things, getting more balance than I have had, but far different balance than what a different business partner decision would be. And sometimes you have to have that conversation. You just have to accept the fact that, you know what, it was great for the last 5 years, but life changes, things change, and sometimes you have to move on. And one of the pieces of advice that we talked about last week that we got from people that were 90 years or older, they say, you know what, people change. Sometimes the friends that you had 10 years ago, they're different, and it's fine to, have mutually agreeable, sometimes it's not mutually agreeable friends or business partners, then go your separate ways and find different people who are more aligned at that stage in your life.
That actually brings up two kind of points there. One, when looking for a business partner, take a look at the friends they hang around. Because what is the old saying? You're like the most 5 people you hang around most.
Yeah.
So if all of them are kind of shrewd, devious, kind of self-centered people, they probably are too in some underlying way, and you don't want that to manifest itself when you're in year 5 of the business and you got to make some tough decisions. Um, I forgot what the other. When you're thinking about business partners, if they can be honest with themselves, if they're the type of person that always blames any mistake on somebody else, when you comes time to have those honest conversations, like, hey, this is what's going on, you're not really being a part of this, and they say, no, it's just you, it's just in your head, no, I'm just as risky as I always was. If they're constantly just pushing back, um, that's definitely not going to be a good business partner. And if you're in that already, that can be extremely challenging, because if they can't be honest with themselves, well, then they're never going to fix a problem, because if it's not their problem, it's your problem. Why would they change? So that's another thing you really to look forward when you're looking for somebody. How often do they accept their own mistakes?
Yeah, I and that's that you have to find a balance there, because I think it's really hard. There are some people that never will. And then there's other people, whether it's for insecurity reasons or whether they just haven't come to terms with it themselves, but they will. Because as humans, we all need time to process things. And sometimes it takes some of us longer to face the truth or the reality of the situation than others. And so if you've been in business with someone for a long time, hopefully you have identified this, that there's that trust, and so you know whether to give them the benefit of the doubt or whether nothing's ever going to change. And I know I've struggled with this. You want to give them the benefit of the doubt, and sometimes you should, because as I said, it's easy for others to see what we blatantly can't. And that doesn't mean that, I'll take myself for example, I won't eventually see it or I don't want to see it, but I might be dealing with other things that either are more important or deep rooted insecurities that I have to work through before I can come to terms with the reality of the situation and be able to say, you know what, Caleb, you were right about that. And I didn't see it. And it took me a while to get here. And maybe you go through something hard in your life, or maybe, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons that people come to terms with some of these things, that, and we're all human and we're all sinful. So this happens to everybody in different areas of life, for different reasons in life, at different stages in life. And it all takes different things for each of us to get to that point where we can look ourselves in the mirror and say, wow, I wish I could have seen what other people were, had I only heard what other people were telling me a long time ago. But that's part of being human.
But I mean, yeah, so yeah, I don't mean everyone does that. Nobody wants to inherently, oh, I'm a mistake, my mistake, my mistake. We love, if we can possibly find a way to push the mistake on other people. We all like to do that to a certain degree, but I have seen it in one of your former partners where nothing was ever this person's fault. And the ego level was so high, it was just disgusting for me to listen to. and you could never have an honest conversation. I just know from just the conversations I've heard, that's completely different than
Yeah.
someone being in denial for a short period of time and then really, you know what, you're right. But this other person would never. They're never in denial. They're just always right. I mean, that's how there is to it. So there's a complete difference. So I'm not saying if they ever blame somebody else for something, get rid of them, because we all will do that. That shows management potential when you can.
In the corporate world, not at Holland Brothers Construction or any of the companies we're involved in. What's interesting you say that is, we've been talking a lot about business partners, and this is one of the things, having worked in the corporate world and of course having been an entrepreneur for going on 15 plus years now. That concept also applies to employees. And the difference there, I don't want to say it's a difference, but people with certain strengths or skill sets seem to inherently tend towards one personality that's more prone to that um, self-denial, or deep-rooted insecurity that makes it far more challenging for them to come to terms with the reality of either with themselves or the situation that they're currently dealing with. But sometimes you need those people in business for at least some period of time. And I remember Joe and I talked about, we've had employees, and you and I have talked about this. We've had employees where we want to fire them because they're not the right fit, but you're just simply not in a position to do so. And it's a very helpless feeling. But just like anything, patience brings good things to those who are willing to wait for it. And sometimes it's not the right time. And so you have to deal with it until you're in a different situation where you can effectively do that without harming your customers and harming your other employees, harming your reputation, etc.
Yep, and that's definitely one of the drawbacks with a business partner. It's one thing to have an employee who's very frustrating, but can do the work and show up for the most of the part of the day. Um, but a business partner, if they stop showing up, if they start getting attitude, and especially if it starts going into the customer part of the business, that is where having a business partner is a very huge drawback. But I think if you do your due diligence in the beginning, I think you can avoid most of these really big headaches with a business partner. But like you said, and everybody knows, people do change, and personal life is a huge thing that changes people. But so also can the business. Whether it's doing extremely well or really struggling, that can bring out the best or the worst in people. It's and sometimes you just don't know until that time.
Have you ever known a husband and wife that are in business together?
I don't think so, apart from on TV things that you might see.
I've often asked myself, well, actually, there was a realtor group up in where we're from in Wisconsin.
Oh,
That was a
yeah,
husband and
yeah,
wife team.
that's true.
And there was it's interesting, actually, there was a husband and wife team, and they're now not husband and wife in the construction industry from where we're
Oh, yeah.
from. And I was actually talking to a former colleague who knows this couple. I'm talking about the construction couple, and they have found, obviously on the personal side of things, it didn't work out, but in business, you would never know that that they had those personal life struggles, and that they're now no longer married. And to me, and they've garnered extreme success, and so they've both acknowledged. And I think this is really, I don't want to use the word cool to see, but I think it shows the level of emotional intelligence that they've been able to bring to the table when it comes to a professional life. That in spite of having gone obviously through some real trauma on the personal side that ultimately ended their marriage, which of course is sad, and I hope business is never worth that, but it did. But they still have the control over their emotions that anybody who sees them in business, they all say, "How is that possible?" But they put on that professional face, and they have that emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I would almost say that it's it's sad that they thought their business was more important than a marriage. And I think in this country, that's part of a sad thing. That, oh, you don't marriage don't work, get rid of it and get a new one, you'll be fine. But keep in business, stay in that business. You want to get that thing to grow. So I think on that level, it's kind of sad. But I do see on a business side, part of what it takes to survive in a business is to try to divest yourself from emotion, because there are ups and downs that if you can't get a straight line of it, it'll kill you, because you can't handle the super highs and also way down low. If you got to try to bring your highs up down a little bit and your lows up a little bit, so you're a little closer to that middle straight line where you can still have emotion, but business is just it's a wild roller coaster. So I think that's probably how it's done for this couple, is they've tamed their emotions, at least when it comes to business, because in order to make a business succeed, sometimes I think you have to get through it.
Yeah, that brings up a question, and people don't often like to hear this, but I say this a lot simply because of the experience and all the different businesses and entrepreneurs I've talked to. I believe it's very hard to be, and again, we're talking secularly speaking here, personally successful and professionally successful at the same points in time in your life, because the time there are very few examples that I've seen it where one doesn't end up sacrificing the other. There are some people that do it, or at least there it seems or appears that they're doing it. I think a perfect example is Tom Brady and his now ex-wife. Everybody thought, "Oh, wonderful family, wonderful company, couple, both fantastic careers." And on the outside it looked good, but there were some real struggles there, and ultimately, of course, it ended um, to a large degree because Tom's love for football was so strong that when he promised his family, and I'm sure Tom Brady, who I'm going to have on the podcast eventually, you can yell at me, would disagree with this, but his love for and passion for football was so strong that when he retired, he just couldn't handle that, and then unretired, and that of course caused a rift on the personal side. And do you believe you can be personally successful and professionally successful at the same time?
So I guess it depends on, what do you mean successful in your personal life? Let's say husband and wife. You mean it will be a marriage that will last, or that everyone's currently 100% happy? What
Well,
is successful?
that's a good point. I guess that's different to everybody. Okay, so let's just define a relationship, marriage, in the sense that you've talked about, that can get through the strain of what a successful professional ends up going through. Because we see it all the time in corporate America. Relationships, either someone doesn't put in the time that corporate America requires or entrepreneurship requires, and so they don't feel fulfilled, maybe is the best word, on the professional side, because they are focused on the personal side, which as I get older and older, really that's the most important thing. Um, but I think we all still have a desire to, and has given us all a purpose, a desire for purpose, which we often find meaning for in a professional career, or they sacrifice the personal side to meet the demanding hours required either in entrepreneurship or the corporate world, and that eventually takes its toll where they lose the relationship, or perhaps this is such a uh, Pandora's box, because I know lots of relationships that survived and did just fine, but parents' relationships with their kids, their dad was never there, or their mom was never there, or as the kids have gotten older, that's what they remember. And so obviously that they were sacrificing the personal side of things for achieving a high degree of success on the professional side of things.
So there's so many things to talk about within that one thing. So I'm going to bring up, so my childhood, my dad worked at UPS, and obviously that is our dad too, or your dad. So he wasn't really home a lot. He worked 12-hour days, and sometimes he'd end up working on Saturdays. But, I look back at my childhood and I thought it was great. And I thought, my dad was great. And I think some people would be in that same situation and be like, my dad was terrible. He was never around. He never did anything with us. So a lot of that depends on mental fortitude.
Yeah.
So how people, like I said, with the risk thing, two people, same situation, same scenario, but take two drastically different views on, or it affected them two drastically different ways. As far as I think of personal life and a business, I really think in order for a business to succeed, you need to put in, if not 100%, almost up there. So for the personal side to succeed, you need to have a significant other who is on board with you not being around 24/7. So if they're fine with you putting in 5%, they know you're the right person. They know that you love them. They know that you want to be there, but you're trying to build this up not just for you, for your business, but in the long run it'll help you out. So when you're, let's say, 40 years old, you guys now can travel to the whole world together. And so having a significant other who has enough foresight to see, I think, is really critical in terms of having a personal and business life be successful. So I think it can happen, but I don't think it's going to be, you're not putting 100% in your business and then 100% into your personal life, because it's not possible. You could put 50-50, and then both are just going to be like this. Nothing's going to go up, nothing's going to go down. It's just going to be kind of there. But part of being a business is, now there are some people who just like their business to be there. They
Yeah.
don't want to grow, they don't want to go smaller, they just want it to be, and for them it'd be a lot easier to work on a relationship. But for most people who are in business, they want to grow, climb, exceed, succeed. Um so I think unless they have the right person, it will be impossible to succeed in both. So, and that's just like a business partner. You rely on them. Well, the same thing in your personal life. You rely on your significant other to understand what you're going through in the business, or try to as much as they can, and help you out with it, not be a source of contention. And I think that's kind of a hard, rare person to find.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes, business secular quotes, is from Jack Welch, the former CEO of General Electric, and I believe he's passed away now. He said, "There are no such thing as a work-life balance. There are work-life choices," and that is so true. You make a decision every day, week, month, on where you're going to focus your time for that day or that week or that month. And I think you bring up a good point. If you're going to be personally successful or fulfilled, maybe let's use that word. And even all of these words are different to everybody. And I hate to use them so generically, because what I might define as being personally fulfilled or successful or happy is far different. I think too frequently in this country or in this world, we, especially on the professional side, view that success based on money, which is the last thing we should be basing it on the professional side. But so, in order, if you're going to have that personal success or fulfillment and professional success or fulfillment, you're going to have to juggle that balance. Sometimes one's at 100% and one's at 10%, and sometimes it flips when it needs to. And maybe that's what that's saying. There's work life balance is always talked about. I don't think it is, but it's I like how Jack Welch defined it as work life choices. There are times when you're going to make the choice because your business needs it, and as long as you can communicate with your significant other and they're on board, you're more apt to be able to accomplish both of those. But I think too frequently that communication doesn't happen, or one's taken for granted, or whether in the workplace you're talking to your boss and say, "Hey, this is an important time for me and my family the next 3 months because of XYZ. You're not going to see me in the office as much." Or if you're running a company, talking to your employees, if you're in a situation where you can do that, communication, if it's going to happen, if you don't have that, it's just not possible.
And yet, so that's just like what we were saying at the beginning of this. Same thing in business, same thing in personal life. That communication thing is key. The trust is key. Basically, if you're going to pick out a spouse, that's how you could kind of pick out a business partner, with just some variations there.
Yeah.
Probably not both the same person, but I think that'd be kind of tough. But
Some people
it,
make it
it
work.
yeah, I think it can happen. I don't think I've seen it, but like the couple that you said in Eau Claire, it didn't work. For
Yeah.
business it did, but then in personal life it failed.
But for
Uh,
the realtor group, it did
yeah,
work
but but
fantastically.
but, but they're working under a company
Yeah.
where it's not really their business. They don't pay for the building and all that stuff. So that takes a lot of stress and worry and everything out of there. So, um, but yeah, they are making it work and they spend lots of time together. Be interesting to see their conversations when people aren't around. But
Well, yeah.
uh,
That'd be scary for anybody to listen to any of our conversations
yeah,
when other people aren't around. When you think about, you've always had business partners. I think all the businesses you've been in, we've been business partners. We've had others in the business. We've had businesses currently right now where we don't have anybody else. It's just you and me. So you've never really done a business on your own. I don't think I have either. And for me, it's hard to even fathom doing that. But I've had guests in the past, and if you listen to some of my previous podcasts where they had such a bad business experience, what they realized is, you know what? I don't want a business partner. What I want is to put the right people in the right place to solve the majority of the things that a business partner can do for me. And of course, that costs money, and sometimes businesses, it takes time to get a business there. But where do you fall if you were going to provide recommendations to people about business partner? Have them or don't have them?
so I'll start by saying have one at least is key. I think it'd be nice if you could pay somebody to do these little things, but two problems with that. One, it does cost money. In some cases, it costs a significant amount of money. If I had to pay somebody for all the accounting work that you do, it costs way more. And two, those people have no loyalty to your business. They if they found somebody else who's paying more, or they don't have time for you, or they have so much business, like, well, I'm gonna let you go, you're not really that big, and now you're left holding the bag and you don't know what to do. Now you got to scramble to find somebody else, and depending on the situation, that could be super detrimental to your business.
You
uh,
don't believe you can foster a culture, and culture is huge. We talk about culture on the Andrew Holland podcast all the time. And culture eats strategy for breakfast every day of the week, twice on Sundays. You don't believe you can foster a culture within your company that will reward loyalty, and so you will get more loyal people?
I think you can to a certain extent. The problem I think we face now is our social media is so it changes people's mental states, and loyalty is dying even in good culture. Now, don't get me wrong, have good culture, because without it, I've seen tons of businesses fail solely because of culture. They had the right people. I've seen people come into a business who had the right attitude, had the right work ethic, and the culture tore them down to be lazy, worthless. Because well, this guy's yelling at the manager and swearing and stuff, and they're getting promoted. So why do I have to work so hard and be the guy everybody hates? So, and then culture just tears that business down. So that's not what I'm saying. But I've seen it. One of our workers, who was a great worker when he showed up, and he just had a terrible family that just tore him down into meth and drugs and jail time and everything like that. But so work was a great culture for him, and he often told me, "You're the best boss I've ever had." Yet there was no loyalty there, and I don't understand. So I don't know why that happens, but I think, yeah, there are some people who can show you loyalty. I think it is possible. I know it's possible. I've seen it. But I think more and more I'm seeing that loyalty is dying and people really only care about themselves. So can it be done where you have good culture and the company just thrives and you get loyalty? Yes. I think now it's very hard to find, though.
So talking about loyalty, but how many companies are really loyal to their employees? You're talking about employees aren't loyal to companies, but are companies really loyal to their employees in this day and age?
Yeah, so and that's what I'm saying. You're seeing around the whole board, and I really think social media is what's really killing that. I know. I think that's a topic for a whole nother time. But yeah, like the Home Depot, was that the owner that basically said all employees are worthless garbage? I mean, that's paraphrasing. Do you know exactly what he said? But
I saw the interview, but
something like that, I mean, just saying it, even if you thought it, just saying it kills morale of all your employees. What do they think of you now? Are they going to show you any loyalty? You just called them all garbage. So yeah, it's an all around the board kind of thing. Loyalty is dying from employees to workers, from employees to owners, and owners to employees. So it's, what do you do? But I think it's easier to get a business partner who you trust than it is to find a truly loyal employee.
so if you had to sum up, we've covered a whole broad issue of topics, all really focused around or stemming from business partners. How to find the right one? Should you have one? Shouldn't you have one? You said you think you should have one, and we talked about some of the reasons why. If you were giving advice to someone, what how would you conclude everything we've talked about in terms of, okay, you want to start a business, you want to find a business partner, these 5 things or 4 things, or these are the things you need to consider. Checkpoint 1, 8, 2, 3, 4.
Also, I think the very first thing is, do you want a business partner? Okay, so if you're someone who does stuff all alone, you hate relying on other people, you'd rather deal with every single aspect of business than having to rely on somebody else. Well, then, if that's a yes, you want to do it alone, don't get a business partner. 2, find someone that you've known for a while and trust. I mean, that is the biggest thing if you want a business partner, is trust. Find someone you can talk to who, when you talk, you feel like they're giving you honest answers and it doesn't just sound like they're circling around a bush. Trying to think if that's, I think those are the most important things.
So trust, which really only comes with knowing someone or seeing them through the ups and downs. And a lot of people, you may have known someone for a lot of time because you've been friends, but don't mistake that for knowing. You may be able to trust them as a friend, but you add that business side of things and it's a whole different type of trust or a whole different experience. So, you know, just because you've been friends with someone for a long time, sometimes it's good to just keep them as friends. And you don't want business to ruin what you've created as a friend. And that's the same thing that can go with relationships, any type of relationship, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a friend, whether it's your kids. I mean, it could be lots of things. So trust, communication.
Yeah. And I guess how risk adverse they are. And talking about friends as business partners, I think that's a little bit harder than someone who isn't really inherently your friend. Because when you're with friends, you're not always as honest as you could be. You don't, they're your friend. You don't really want to hurt their feelings.
Should you be friends then?
Yeah. Well, for friends, you will get to the point, but not be direct. In business, you don't have time to tiptoe around. You got to just tell them, this is how it is. We got to do something about this. So I actually think, in terms of business partner, someone that you work with at, let's say you work with at a bank, and you can see exactly what happens when they run into a major issue with a customer. You can see exactly how they're going to respond. And if they respond well when they're working under somebody else, when they're working for themselves, they're going to respond even better, because they're going to show themselves more loyalty, no matter how loyal they are to the customer or to the other business. So I think that is probably the best place to find a business partner, is someone you've been working with a long time and you love how they work, you love their attitude, you've seen how they deal with problems. Now that doesn't mean everything's going to be hunky dory, smooth sailing if you become business partners, but I would rather have that, I think, than a friend. Not to say that it can't be done, but I think it would actually be a little harder with a friend than it would be a colleague.
Yeah. Well, and I think, to your point, everything we're saying, if you think you're going to find a business partner and it's going to be rosy, well, no, you're always going to go through challenges. That's like obvious. But it's, can you get through those challenges and still have the business partners be able to think about the business and move forward?
Yeah. Still, I mean, I think as you become business partners and you are there you will become friends. Whereas the other way around, being friends and becoming business partners, is a little harder, I think, to deal with.
Yeah. Well, Caleb, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
As
thank you,
always, this
Evan.
has been a second episode of the Holland Brothers Series. We're going to have more of these. I always enjoy it. And you always have a great perspective that I think our listeners appreciate, and that I certainly appreciate, because you can see things. Well, just we've always talked about, talk to the people closest around you and ask them their perspective, because they are typically going to be more comfortable being honest with you, and they'll be able to see things in a light that you can't see.
Well, thanks for having me again.
Thank you so much for watching the Andrew Holland Podcast. As we've said, follow me on Twitter, Holland Podcast. We'll talk about all the concepts that we did in this episode throughout the week, and other business ideas or concepts, relevant topics that come up during that week on Twitter, on Threads. Follow us on YouTube. The Andrew Holland Podcast is the channel. If you subscribe, be sure you like it. Be sure you share it with your friends and colleagues so that we can grow our support group, and you'll get updated every week when we get the video version of the podcast. And of course, do the same thing on your choice of where you get your podcasts, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts. Thank you so much for joining again this week. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk again next Wednesday. Thank you for listening to the Andrew Holland Podcast. Be sure to visit our website, theandrewhollandpodcast.com, for additional content on business, entrepreneurship, and everything in between. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Andrew Holland Podcast, to get notifications when new podcasts have been released. And lastly, follow us on Twitter, Holland Podcast. That's Holland Podcast, for all the conversations we're having outside the podcast. Thanks again so much for joining us this week. Have a great day, and we'll talk again next week.